Hi guys, it's me Amy. As promised, I'm going to show you how to make a Batman cake. Pretty easy, kind of hard, just mostly fiddly. So, you'll need a few things, some of which you can make, but trust me, some of it easier just to buy. First one is some fondant icing, or white icing. This stuff you can buy just from Woolies or Coles or any of those sort of places, so pretty easy to find. You will need some CMC, which is like a hardener, icing hardener, just if you want stuff to sit away from the cake, or if you want it to be a bit taller than the cake itself so it can freestand. Otherwise, just put it right up against a solid surface like the cake and you'll be fine. You'll need some fondant colouring or Sugarcraft food dye. It's different from the liquid stuff you get from the little free-range packs at Coles or Woolies, so you'll have to go to Spotlight for them. And you'll need a knife, little flat blade spatula thing. Rulers are always fantastic, especially if you want to get good lines, and a good soft surface to work off. I use the pastry mats, but you can use just plain table, just you'll have to dust it with some icing sugar or cornstarch. Either way, it'll work fine, and I'll show you how to do it. Okay guys, so obviously to decorate a cake, you need a cake. Now obviously this one's decent size, enough to feed a small army, but you can pretty much work with whatever you got in the cupboard, and as far as baking trays go. This one's pretty much a double back, so it's nice and thick, so I don't have to cut too much. You can just get a couple of baking trays and layer up the cakes. Just make sure they're even before you put any icing or anything on them. So to do the even ones, you just slice the top off, put a little bit of cream or whatever in the middle. I find buttercream works much better, it holds. And you put your second layer on and just make sure it's all square that way. After that, she's all good. I also use a little bit of greaseproof paper, just to measure up around the sides. Kind of the same as carpentry, measure once, measure twice, cut once. This way, without actually putting anything on the cake, I can work out exactly how much I need and where it can go. So, easier trick, this saves time and energy. So we'll get started on making some buildings first up. Okay guys, so to make our buildings we need two colours. We need a grey for the actual concrete part of the building and some yellow for the little windows and the lights on and all the cutesy poo stuff. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll mix them up using my little ready-made batch and a little bit of my yellow food dye. Now, with the fondant dyes, you don't need a lot, so don't go crazy thinking that it's going to be like the other stuff where you need like a good dash of it. With this stuff, in particular, you don't want to make your icing too wet and you don't want to make it too gooey, because once you've done it, it's a real pain in the ass to fix. So don't use too much, don't use too much. So that's heaps, just tiniest little scrape of it on there. And it will easily do this much. That much, you could almost dye that much. So I want really nice bright colours, so I have used a little bit extra, but you don't need a lot. Otherwise you just end up with really moist stuff. So to mix it in, it's pretty much like playing with Play-Doh. To mix in the colours, you're just going to knead it in. I use just the palm of my hands when it's this small because it's easier, and it just means I've got less to clean up on the mat. So I'll go ahead, just mixing it in, nice bright yellow. I'll keep mixing it in and then I'll show you the next bit. Okay guys, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make our grey. Using the ready-made, easier option of the white icing stuff. So obviously I don't need quite that much grey. This stuff goes a surprisingly long way. So all I'm going to do is use my little knife, cut off about what I'm going to need, a bit extra, and that's all we're going to colour. Now, first thing you need to remember, this stuff air dries. So have your Glad wrap ready. Everything needs to be kept covered and away from the air. Don't need a lot, just enough. Cover up. Make sure there's no air in there. Ready to use again next time. So, we've got our ready-made. Now this stuff is hard to knead, so you're going to need to knead it for a few minutes before you do anything else to it. Just in the hands, if it's really, really hard, you can put them in the microwave, but I find the heat in your hands is enough to soften it up. So we'll just warm that up a little bit. Now, we need to add some CMC. Now, the point of this stuff, it just makes it harder. So all you have to do is, if you can't find CMC, go into a cake shop or party supplies, or even some of the new cooking shops and cookware stuff places have this stuff. So you just need a little bit on the end of your spoon, just enough for the amount that you got. So about 1/4 of a teaspoon, if that, for small lots. Teaspoon if you really want to make sure it's hard as. And you just knead it through so it's all mixed in neatly. Okay, so now I'm going to add my black dye to make my grey buildings. Ironically enough, does not matter how much of this stuff you add, it will never go black. It will only go grey. I've learnt this. Buy the black. It's more expensive, but you'll never ever 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 get the black. I've learnt. So all you need to add this sort of dye, because it's not in the squeeze bottle, is just a little bit on the end of a knife, not a lot. Add it to your mixture, and again just rub it through. Okay, so I've got our nice gooey grey fondant and my pure icing sugar or cornstarch shaker. Now, in fairness, if you don't have one of these, not that they're hard to find, if you don't have one, a Chuck's cloth with a rubber band tied around it with some powder inside will work just as fine. So just make sure you get nice coating all over the bench. And we're just going to roll out our fondant. We'll not spill water all over it. Just rolling it out. It may stick to your rolling pin, so you'll just have like that. So you just have to put a little bit of sugar over the top, and it'll work fine. So we just take our template. Now this is the same width as my cake. So if I make our buildings a little bit wider, they should be about the right size. So obviously, a ruler comes in handy for these bits. That way you get all neat and tidy. So just using lightly the edge of our knife. You don't need a lot of pressure. It's only sugar. I'll pull away. And it can be rolled back up just like normal dough. And then just slicing different widths, because not all buildings are as thick as each other. So just nice straight lines, drawing the knife down, not too fast and not with too much pressure or you'll warp them out of shape. And we just make little rectangle shapes for our buildings. So, and if it does stick to the mat or the table, just run a knife just lightly underneath and it should lift up pretty well okay. Now for this one, I'm not having perfectly tidy buildings because I want to try and make it a little bit crazy. But there you got little rectangle grey shapes. Find a nice flat surface to lay them on, and we want to try and use our paper templates as a gauge of just how many buildings we need. So obviously when you lay them out, you're not having them all next to each other, you have a little bit of space between, because that's how we get our cityscape effect. So we'll sit down, we'll do all of them up, and I'll show you what to do next.